And with that, let me go ahead and open my info here. So today we are doing another exciting public library makerspace tour. This is only the second one that we've done in a public library space, so this will be very cool. Just to tell you a little bit about who is leading the tour, we have Esti Brennan here with us. Esti's library experience began in 2007 and varied from frontline public service to specialist cookbook collections, that is hard to say, to Twitter, before landing in the DC Public Library's Makerspace, where she has used her lifelong interest in sewing and textiles to create a curriculum of sewing programs. She's currently serving as the interim manager of the labs at DC Public Library and recently opened the Fab Lab pop-up at NOMA, the library's first pop-up and first shipping container. And Esti, I'm sure you probably saw the information about the Fab Lab pop-up in our email, but for the folks that haven't seen that, I would love for you to just give an introduction. As I noted before, for folks who have come on, please type questions in the chat box during the tour, and at the end, we usually have some time for Q&A. These typically take between 30 minutes to 1 hour, and I know that the container is not that big, so this may be a shorter tour. But Esti might also talk about some of the other spaces as the manager of the labs. There is other spaces beyond this container, and of course it's a temporary space. So you'll have a lot to talk about on that front.
Definitely.
Okay. And that's all I have.
Great. So yeah, I'm Esti. I'm the interim manager for the labs at DCPL, which, if you are not aware, Erica is also an alumni of. Mm-hmm. One of the very early lab staff members, and we miss her very much. So the lab started in kind of slowly over a couple of years. I think the first tech was bought in 2012, I want to say. And then between 2012 and 2015, we opened 3 different labs in the MLK library, which is the main DC public library building, which is currently closed for renovation, which is why everything pretty much that I'm going to talk about today is a temporary space. So we had, among a few other things, the 3 big labs were the Fab Lab, which is our makerspace, the Studio Lab, which is a video and audio production lab, and the Memory Lab, which is a personal digital archiving suite, so transferring your old VHS or photos or slides to preserve family and personal memories. Each of the labs kind of has a distinctive mission, but it's the same staff working on all of them for the most part. So we try to kind of cross-pollinate and make all the technology as interactive as possible and encourage people to find ways to use all of the labs together. One thing that's been really cool is we have a program called the Maker in Residence, which is funded by the DC Public Library Foundation. And this year's Maker in Residence, Sade Makanan, is using her Ethiopian heritage and a lot of family artifacts to create art using all 3 of the labs. And it will eventually be both a performance piece and then a digital record of it. So we're hoping to be able to share that down the line. So keep an eye out for it. So right now, you can see a small corner of the Fab Lab pop-up at NOMA. You can basically see me, Frida Kahlo, and this really neat pegboard right here. The pop-up, which I'm going to show you much more of in a few minutes, is the brainchild of the DCPL Foundation. It was funded through a combination of the Library Foundation, sponsorship from NOMA BID, which is a neighborhood organization in NOMA, which is a very kind of up-and-coming part of DC right now. We also had sponsorship from Uber and from IMLS, which is pretty common. IMLS also funded the earliest days of the labs. So they bought our technology, and we're obviously very, very grateful to them for that. So this pop-up is meant to stand for about 2 years. The space was donated by a local company that doesn't really have a building planned for it yet. So here we are, and I'll show you the outside in a minute. It's pretty awesome. The idea for the pop-up is that we're a classroom space. We're not a full lab space. We don't take reservations. We have a pretty minimal suite of technology here, but we do a lot of classes, especially we're in a very like business heavy district. There's a lot of people who work in this area. So we do lunchtime classes that are kind of like a fun, like come and make a flower crown and relax on your lunch break. And then in the evenings, we do kind of more hands-on technology classes with 3D printing and sewing. And we're kind of branching out into some gardening and sustainability focused things because we have this outdoor space, but our first class for that is actually tonight. So we'll see how that turns out. All right, I'm waiting for someone to finish their meeting. So we're gonna wait to look at the other end of the lab for a minute. But I'm gonna take you guys outside and hopefully give you a sense for what this space looks like. It is in 2 shipping containers, one 40-foot and one 20-foot. And they were painted by a local artist named Mark Pekala. And they're inspired by a series of old posters that are very important to DC's history that I unfortunately can't remember the details of right now, but I'm happy to share those later for anyone who's interested. If it gets super bright, I apologize. I'm gonna try to show you this without tripping over anything. So I'm walking out of the big container now, and you can kind of see it's a pretty standard shipping container, but we've got some doors cut in the side to let in some light and air. Got these really bright murals. And then we've also got, this is kind of what you see from the street, is this other shipping container, which is our storage space. And that's where our generator lives, which is how we kind of keep this thing running. And I think it's probably quite loud right there. So walk past the generator and then go away from that. And we have this nice outdoor space with some sunshades. It is very bright. They're not really helping right now, but a little later in the day, it's going to be really nice in between the containers, and we try to do a lot of our programming outside. You can see this is the other end of the big container. We're going to go in through one end, so you can kind of see the whole thing. And I haven't tripped on anything yet, and I'm very impressed with myself.
You're doing a great job. That's a lot to manage.
Yeah, I was going to do this on my phone, and then I figured I'd probably really trip, so. All right, so you can kind of see, this is the long view down the container. It was designed by a group called BC Workshop, who are a building community workshop. They are public, nonprofit focused architects who do a lot with sustainability and affordable housing, and we're super, super happy to have worked with them. They were really amazing. So we've got, I don't know which way to go. I'm gonna walk, actually gonna turn off this fan because I think it's quite loud.
I can't hear it that much in the audio,
okay.
So you can leave it on if it makes it more comfortable.
I'll turn it back on in a minute. Yeah, so this is the space. You can see Portia behind me, who is our 3D printing guru and also does most of our children's programming because she is a wizard. So this space, actually, this container started out as an art gallery in Texas, and we repurposed it. So you can see the ceiling. Ceiling was originally put in, and then we had a couple of community build days where people, mostly our old Fab Lab patrons, came and helped us put together the pegboards for the walls and put up some of the shelving and stuff like that. All of this is custom designed. The pegboards are eventually going to be tool storage once we have more tools to store. Right now, a lot of them have like tape and random fun things on them. Got shelving for our 3D printers. There's one of our printer bots. Like I said, the technology in this space is pretty minimal. We have 2 printer bots and an Ultimaker. The laser cutter is actually getting installed tomorrow, so unfortunately I'm just gonna show you where that goes and not actually the laser. We have these really nice custom built tables that I'm trying to get a better view of, that are bracketed to the wall but also on sawhorses, so we can take them down and adjust the height if we need them to be accessible or just work on a project that requires a taller or shorter table. And we don't keep a lot of stuff out in this lab because it's such a small space, so we tend to just pull things out for the class we're teaching and then put them away in that other container where the generator was. So it's a very flexible space, which was how we tried to design it. You can see like lots of stuff on shelves. I know every makerspace is just like full of random shelves and boxes of things. So we've got that going. We've only been open for 6 weeks and it's already messy. There's Portia again. And getting back towards, here's a really, I think I can get it in my computer. Maybe, is there a flower crown on screen?
We can see a flower, yeah.
Yeah, I can't really see where my computer's going, sorry. So we do, the combination of like techie programs and sort of relaxing programs has been really nice. We always did craft programs in the labs, but this space is just really well suited to them. So we kind of get to expand on that a lot, which I really love. I basically just teach jewelry classes at this point and it's super fun. All right, so we've got some fun printmaking artifacts. We have an Ultimaker, which is there. It is air printing right now, which of course it is, because if I, tried to show it to someone and it was running properly, that would just be ridiculous. Yeah, so that's our space. This is kind of our staff area. This table is where the laser cutter is going to go, and it's going to be vented externally. So we're just going to be flowing things directly out through a filter, which we've never been able to do before because we've never had a purpose-built space before. So that's kind of exciting. So we won't have two massive, heavy BOFA filters that are sucking up all of our power and taking up about 2/3 of the space in this lab. So that's been really cool. The stuff that's in here is kind of a mixture of things that we asked for or designed and things that the architects designed. But all of it is very kind of pro-patron and pro-flexibility. And I have to say that it's worked out super well so far. Like I said, we've only been open about 6 weeks. We've had, in that time, close to 400 people in this space, about 150 for classes, and then a lot of people just kind of dropping by to see what's going on. There are a lot of younger people in this neighborhood, a lot of young families, so we're trying to be as kid-friendly as possible, which is really nice because our old makerspace often had, bits of metal or sharp wood on the floor. So having this space that's just kind of a blank slate makes it really easy to kind of adapt to different groups. So you've kind of seen the space now. I'm happy to answer questions, and I will also be happy to talk about the other labs.
Okay, let's see if nobody's typed in any questions yet in the chat box. I have some, let's see, I wrote down a lot of notes, so I'll start asking, and if anyone else has questions in the meantime, feel free to ask. I was curious about, so you've had 150 to 400 some odd people visit the space. For making reservations for classes or class size, sounds like, well, you have the outdoor space to move into if you potentially get a lot of people. But how do you all manage that?
So we do schedule things in advance. We use Acuity scheduling software, which we've used in the labs for a number of years. Most of our very hands-on classes, in particular the sewing classes and the 3D design classes, are limited to 5 to 8 people just because that's the amount of technology we have, that's the amount of oversight that we can actually give. The craft classes are a little bit looser. We do try to get people to sign up, but we take walk-ins for those all the time. Especially they're generally pretty drop-in friendly, so people who come by on their lunch and just make something for 15 minutes, that's fine. We just did our first big program here, which was actually a DIY ice cream program for kids, where you put milk in a bag with ice and salts and shake it and it becomes ice cream. It was intended to be one of our kind of routine smallish programs, like 10 kids plus some adults, until one of the DC council members who oversees the ward of DC that we're in decided he wanted to bring his daughter, and his staff started advertising the program, and all of a sudden we were up to 30 people signed up.
Wow.
So that was a bit of a, oh, okay, that's not what we were expecting. But because we had the outdoor space, we dragged over a picnic table from the garden next door, and they didn't yell at us, so that was cool. And we just kind of did an assembly line ice cream program with, it ended up being about 45 people in the end. And there were kids running all over, shaking giant bags of ice and getting really sugar high. And it was super fun. So we're really hoping that we can keep doing that. That was the best use of the outdoor space we've had so far. As I mentioned to Erica before this, we kind of had some bad luck with our opening date. We were supposed to open earlier in the spring, and it would have been beautiful and like 70 degrees all the time. We opened at the end of June, and it has pretty much been either 85 to 95 degrees or pouring for the last 2 months, as DC tends to do. So we've had some challenges with that. We are a weather-dependent space, so if there is a heat emergency activated in DC, we just don't open. If we're in here and it's incredibly hot, we do close and cancel classes, which we've had to do a couple of times so far. But in general, we've noticed that even if we try to push through and stay open, nobody shows up. So it kind of works out. And we're really looking forward to the fall. I think I'm going to try to schedule myself in this space every single day in October, because that is the most beautiful month in DC. And I think it's going to be really nice here. So we're looking forward to that.
That's awesome. No, that was interesting. So do you foresee, since it's weather dependent, you foresee staying open in the winter as much? Or I guess it's weather dependent as well, right? There's no air conditioning or anything like that, or air conditioning or heating in the space, is there?
We actually do. We have 2 air conditioning units, although one of them has just been displaced by the laser, so I guess we really have one. The problem is, because the space is sort of like a pavilion and not very enclosed, it's really hard for them to efficiently cool the space. So we can use them, but they don't do that much. Big fans help a lot, but there's just a threshold above, like, you can't cool it. Yeah. I kind of think we'll have better luck with heating it because the container is actually insulated. Okay. So with the doors shut and some space heaters running, I think that we'll do okay. And I'm actually also looking into getting some of those like electric standing heaters for right outside the space as well, and see how that works. So one of the reasons we say weather dependent is just we're going to see how it works. We've never done this before. So, and thankfully the staff have been awesome and really game for like trying stuff out, which has been really nice.
That is cool. Awesome. I think there's only me and Jess on the call now. So Jess asked a good question though. Jess is curious about how you're funded and how funding will work moving forward. And Jess also says, what an amazing space. Thanks, Jess. Jess is in the other room down the hall for me.
Nice. Yeah, so our initial funding for this space came largely from the DCPL Foundation, which is the nonprofit that supports the library. Also from NOMA Bid, which is like the business collective of this neighborhood. They provided a fair amount of funding. And we're actually on a site that they use for other things like movie screenings and a farmer's market. So we have some like interchangeable stuff with them. We also got some private corporate sponsorship from Uber. The corporation that owns the lot we're on donated the space for a certain number of years. And then IMLS bought our technology. So all of the setup funding was kind of donations. Going forward, we run on the library's budget, basically, plus support from the foundation for programming materials. I mean, all of the staff are DCPL employees, so our salaries are already taken care of. I think, would eventually like to see this space used for more things. Like, we'd love to see the outreach team use it for stuff. We'd love to do story times here. So going forward, we may be dipping into things from other parts of the library's budget. But for right now, we're sort of just working on this model, I guess, on this funding model.
Yeah, this is really cool. I'm just gonna keep asking questions, even if it's just us, because we record this and post it online. So why not? So I'm curious, since you were talking more about outreach, do you guys give out library cards there? What is the training like? Is it like the old setup where folks have to go through a certain amount of training to get access to the equipment? Or how do you manage sort of membership and since you're a pop-up library, essentially maybe administering cards or anything like that?
Yep. So we administer cards. We have the same software that you'd use in the regular library space and a stack of cards. We've only done like 15 or so far, but
Okay.
a lot of we also encourage people to sign up online because you can do that as well here, and that's a little easier for most people.
Yep.
So we are definitely part of the library system. The way that I usually explain it to people who come in and say, "Oh, cool, does that mean I can use your computers and print something?" No, like we're like the meeting room at your local library where they do fun classes, which does not have a Xerox machine in it. So we can do some things, we can't do others. Like we don't have book pickup or anything like that here, just because we're really, really tiny, and that would be really a huge strain on our space. All people need to sign up for classes here is a library card. Once we start opening our next phase interim space, which will be more like a replica of our old Fab Lab, we'll go back towards safety orientation, certifications, then machine reservations. Right now, because the machines are so sparse, we are not really doing that, and we're not doing a lot of patron hands on the machines either. Some of that is like the power draw, like we can't have laser cutter reservations in here because we can't run the laser cutter and a bunch of other stuff at the same time because we're running off a generator, and we all know the lasers take up a huge amount of power. So we're a pretty open model right now. Like people don't need to sign a waiver, don't need to do a safety orientation. When we have people working with like sewing machines and stuff like that, we do give like a bit of a safety spiel. And once we know that our next space is going to be opening, which is going to be just like a storefront space in a big municipal building in DC, hopefully opening this fall. It's still kind of up in the air. Then we'll revert to our old model. Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, that's good. That definitely answered it. Let's think. So, Jess, do you have any other questions? I'm just checking it out. Feel free to type them or come on. I don't think you have a microphone, so I don't think Jess can come on unless you're on your computer. Let's see. Jess does have more questions. What kinds of digital resources are available for patrons? Is there a forum or chat component to what you guys are doing?
We don't have any forums or chat components, partly because the library doesn't really have a way to host something like that. Eventually, we've kind of pitched having like an online sort of maker Google group or something like that we'd like to incorporate, but so far we haven't really gotten any buy-in from the people who would have to approve that, so we'll see. As far as digital resources, I mean, the library system as a whole has tons and tons of digital resources. They are, everything you'd pretty much expect from a public library. We also, the things that we use the most for the labs are lynda.com, which we have free access to through the library, which is, as you may be aware, like a really incredible technology training sort of education suite. And we send people there all the time for Illustrator and design work and stuff like that. We have a couple of other useful things. We also really heavily encourage people to draw from the library's online special collections to get images and source material and things like that. Yeah, I think as far as digital collections goes, that's most of it. And we obviously, in our classes, introduce people to kind of the big online things like Thingiverse and Tinkercad and stuff like that.
Cool. Let's think. I was curious. So you're the first. I liked what you were saying about how you did an ice cream program. I was talking to, and that you guys are getting into gardening stuff. So Amy, the other person who leads these tours, thinks about making, I almost want to say it's like holistic. It's not just the idea of doing digital circuitry or working with a 3D printer, but there's sort of a spectrum of things that we all do in our life that tie into what might be considered making. It's essentially you're following a series of steps to have an actual outcome of something physical. So I was curious about some of the ideas you have about gardening, and hello Jenny, thanks for just coming on. Some of the ideas you have about gardening, some of the ideas that you have about like the ice cream idea. How did that come about? How did that happen? And also, if you can talk a little bit more, I know that the sewing component that you guys have has grown a lot since I was working at DCPL. So if you could talk first about sort of that idea of making, going into these other ideas based on the space that you're in or what you have access to or the community you're in. And then B, talk a little bit more about going beyond sort of laser cutting, 3D printing into sewing and some of the programs you guys are doing with that.
So I think holistic is a really good word to use to how we approach maker stuff. The 3 labs that we have are really good examples of kind of really different prongs that work surprisingly well together. And as we kind of stretch out into more things, a lot of what's guiding us is really what people are asking for. And I think what you see a lot of in DC is a lot of people who live in this urban environment who, you know, have maybe a lobbyist job or something like that, who are like, well, but I really miss, like, you know, I used to play in the dirt as a kid or whatever it is that drives them, and they want kind of more hands-on things. And obviously kind of DIY everything has gotten really popular over the last decade and stuff. So we get a lot of people who just don't really know where to go to learn this kind of stuff. And especially in the neighborhood we're in, most of the people who live here are super new to DC because this neighborhood is so new. So we get a lot of people who are like, oh, like, I had no idea the library would let me, like, use a sewing machine or just, like, come and make a little, like, friendship bracelet or something like that. So a lot of it is just kind of creating that sense of, like, an urban life that's not totally kind of sterile from that hands-on way of looking at things. And yeah, so we definitely want to go beyond the obvious maker technologies. Some of it is stuff the library was already doing. Like the ice cream program is something that I'm pretty sure children's librarians have been doing for decades at this point. So that was just something that Portia, who you saw earlier, was like, this would be great because we're outside. So if we spill all the milk everywhere, it doesn't matter. And it very obligingly rained the next day. So it was perfect. And so when we started the sewing machine program, which was in 2016, I think, yes, I joined the lab summer 2016. We started the sewing program that October. My drive with that was, hey, here are sewing machines nobody's using. I know how to do this, and I'm not teaching any classes yet. But kind of my underlying idea is, like, I want people to think, oh, I would have never thought of, like, sewing as a maker technology. I think of sewing as something my grandma did. So integrating into that, and we actually had a lot of people who ended up using the laser cutters and the sewing machines kind of in conjunction, which was super cool. And the other side of that is that I wanted there to be classes and technology that women in particular would feel really comfortable using and coming into the lab for in a way that they might not feel as welcome in a space that they're not quite as clear on what it is that they're going to be doing. And we had really good response to that. My colleague Molly has really run with the sewing program and expanded it. When we closed the MLK library, we all sort of scattered, and the sewing program mostly went to the Petworth Library for a year, where it was so popular that now that we're winding it down there, all of the patrons are really sad. So we're trying to encourage them to come to the Container Lab. Pretty much every Wednesday evening is a sewing program. So we do 2 basic ones at this point. We do Sewing Machine 101, which is how to use a sewing machine. And Molly is actually about to introduce Sewing Machine 201, which is how to take care of your sewing machine, which is really, really important, and something most people don't really learn. And then the other super, super popular sewing class is a DIY mending workshop. That's very collaborative. We provide a lot of tools and scrap material and things like that. People come in, bring their pants that the button popped off of, or like a shirt where a seam is tearing out, or something that needs to be hemmed or like mildly altered. We don't do kind of like tailoring, but we can do, you know, razor, lower a hem, that kind of thing. And then sort of with Molly's help, but also helping each other to figure out how to do that and to make it happen. I have taught that class a couple of times, and it's the most fun thing to do because people get so into it and get so creative. And I've watched Molly's classes, and they're even better because they're just in this super cool space where I think the kind of weirdness of the space inspires people to do kind of very creative things. Although we don't have a dressing room, which is a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. That's something you don't even think about. Like, that's, I've now, this is the 7th tour that we've done, and that's not even something people have talked about in terms of having
Yeah.
sewing machines or embroidery machines, because I've seen them in a lot of spaces, but nobody's addressed that component of it, which is actually pretty important.
Well, I'm happy to talk about it. We actually have gotten some requests for embroidery machines and stuff. They're a little bit out of our scope right now, but down the road, I would love that. We did buy a serger last year that has not been put into public rotation yet, but Molly did a lot of work on learning it, and we're all going to learn it soon. And then, so all of the stretchy fabrics. And I think Jess is asking, where do we source our fabric from? Yeah. That is actually an ongoing challenge. The beginnings of the sewing program were all donated, mostly from my house, because I had years and years of extra fabric and stuff. We are we have some funding to buy stuff, but as with a lot of libraries, like we have some very strict purchasing rules, so it can be difficult to get sort of random odds and ends. Mm-hmm. We've been pretty lucky with donations of fabric. If someone brings something in, like, you know, brings in a pair of jeans, they're going to turn it to cutoffs. We'll say like, oh, like save that denim because you can use that for patches. So we try to be thrifty with how we use it. We're working on a couple of partnerships with like scrap fabric collecting places to maybe get some stuff, but that's still early days. So not sure yet. We've just kind of hit a place where we've expanded so much we actually really can't run completely on haphazard donations. So check back with me in a couple months on that one. And we have not done any pattern making stuff at this point. Jess was asking, do they create their own patterns? We have not done pattern making yet, just because we're not completely comfortable teaching that yet, but we're hoping that's something that will go forward. We've had requests for it. We're also trying to bring on another staff member who has a ton of experience with sewing from patterns. So that's something we're also hoping to offer sooner rather than later.
Cool. Oh man, there's so much to think about with what you guys are doing. It's very different from, I think, most of the spaces we've talked with thus far, just in terms of both public librarianship and makerspace ideology. I think the thing that you hit the nail on the head of is building, as Amy, again, I'm going to keep quoting Amy because she's not here, radically inclusive spaces for making that can include different people and different projects, and thinking about it in a, I guess, I don't want to say more non-traditional way, but a way that focuses on different types of technology, tools, and access in a way that's welcoming to many. So I just want to give you guys a shout out for that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about it just because we have the time, and Jess is still on. So Jess has not been as exposed to all of these different spaces that exist, but has been down to Boston and seen a lot of what's going on there, has a lot of connections down there. So if you can just speak, I guess, briefly about the Studio Lab and the Memory Lab, just give a brief breakdown of those for the call and for the recording, that would be great.
Sure. So the Studio Lab was the second major lab that opened. It had a full recording suite, a green screen, and really extensive amounts of video and audio production technology and software. Erica, honestly, you know more about that tech than I do. I've always kind of been a Fab Lab person, but I'm working on learning it. So we had a lot of local people producing music, producing video, teaching classes on how to do those things, everything from like Photoshop basics to like how to go out and shoot video at a protest or something like that. And that was some of our most popular stuff. And it's also one of the really interesting pieces of the library where like sometimes I'll see a video or like hear some audio from a local performer and be like, oh, I know that person, like they were in the Studio Lab. So like our tech really like helps people get out there, which is very exciting. Currently the Studio Lab is housed in a conference room at the Shepherd Park Neighborhood Library. The awesome staff who are running it right now, Will and Casey, have done a really kind of amazing job with turning a glass windowed study room into something like an actual lab. We don't have a lot of recording capacity anymore, so it's more editing suite. So they have a bunch of computers and laptops, and they're on hand 2 to 3 days a week to teach classes and to help people kind of one-on-one learn the technology and get their projects up and running. And the studio's crew outside of their actual lab does a ton with recording local oral history stuff. They did a lot of work around the closing of the MLK library and kind of creating a digital record of that. So creating and curating that content is also one of the major projects of the Studio Lab. And for the last year, they have had a partnership with a local radio station that's kind of a brand new thing, and have been doing a weekly radio show featuring local artists and activists. And the city's big project this year is the commemoration of 1968 and MLK. So they've done a ton around that. It's been a really fascinating experience. You can find the radio station on our website on the podcasts page. All of our shows are archived, and you can listen to all of them. And then the Memory Lab was actually the project of Jamie Mears, who is a Library of Congress fellow, who was tasked with, I think it was to create some sort of digital archiving project. I don't remember the details, but so the Memory Lab was her brainchild. It's sort of a small cubicle / study room that has VHS converters, a really high-end scanner, a bunch of other like floppy disk converters and things like that, just kind of a massive rack of every semi-obsolete looking piece of technology that we can get our hands on. And then a really, really meticulously made wiki so that people can learn to use all these things and to use the software that's on the computer in there in a really DIY way, partly because, we want to empower people to do those things on their own without, it's more meaningful to take your own VHS and turn it into a digital file than it is to like hand it to somebody at, I don't know where they would even do that, like Kinko's or something like that. So we really want people to feel like they have a hand in preserving their family memories. And actually, as of last year, it was grant funded through Jamie's project, and then there was a second grant awarded for the Memory Lab Network, which means that our team got to meet with and facilitate the creation of memory labs in 7 more libraries across the country. It was everything from other public libraries to tribal library to a couple of other like very niche sort of institutions across like massive range of sizes of communities. And it's been a huge success, and you can follow them. I think it's MemLab Network on Twitter. And yeah, I can always get anyone that link properly. I don't remember what it is right now.
Yeah, we'll send a follow-up email with some of this stuff, just because we'll probably have more folks tuning in on YouTube and checking this out after, which is cool.
Yeah, so Memory Lab is expanding like crazy. We get requests to put it in basically every single neighborhood library, which if someone wanted to give us the funding for that, we would totally do, because it's a really incredible project. And one of the things about the Memory Lab is like teaching how to do the technology transition, but also about kind of responsible digital curation. And just because something is digital doesn't mean it lasts forever, which is one of those principles that seems really obvious once you think about it, but really doesn't occur to most people. Yeah. In the same way that I'm sure everyone thought their VHS would be playable for the rest of history. So,
and they don't even make them anymore. So there was somebody here at our library saying, "Oh, I was talking to one of our classroom technology folks about VHS," and he was telling him it's an older retired professor talking to our CTS person. He said they don't even make VHS players anymore, and that's a bit of a problem. But for those, it's really good to digitize and archive in that regard, because we won't have them and the components unless we make them on our CNC equipment much longer.
Basically, yeah. And we've had all kinds of problems with like getting stuff repaired or sourcing things when things break, but we'll do what we can. We'll scramble to get as much stuff digitized as possible and see what we can do in the future.
Yeah, that is awesome. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer. And but just thinking, did you mention which library that's based in for people that
sorry. The Memory Lab is currently based at the Northeast Neighborhood Library. And like I said, that's when we're really wanting to expand. So there's a chance that once MLK Library reopens, we'll have one there and keep one at Northeast and maybe start a couple more as well.
Cool.
That's definitely the most kind of scalable of the labs because it doesn't require huge amounts of space.
Yeah. Awesome. And like I said, I don't want to keep you for too much longer. So Jess, if you don't have any further questions, I guess we'll call this. Oh, it sounds like inspiring people to go beyond contemporary survival. Nice. Jess says thanks, as you can tell.
I love that phrasing.
Yeah. So with that, I guess that's it for today. And thank you so much, Esti. And I apologize that people came in and out, but like, hey,
No worries.
we post this on YouTube anyways, so people will be able to check it out later, which is why we do that. And
yeah,
I think it was amazing. Thank you again.
Yeah, it's so good to be here. Anyone is welcome to get in touch with us. It's fab.lab@dc.gov. We're happy to answer questions and stop by and visit us.
Yay. Okay. So I'm going to stop the recording.